Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
The Prime Minister made a short address to the nation today and disappointed many people, surprised many people by not mentioning anything about the standoff in Ladakh with China. Now, I said quite deliberately, it disappointed many people. It also surprised many people because there was anticipation that he will say something. At the same time, I have to say that I was relieved. Why was I relieved is what today's Kattak letter is about. Because leadership, particularly when you lead a large country with many strategic issues, leadership is not something that you exercise or where you make decisions to please public opinion or to respond to public opinion at that point. Leadership in a complex country like India or any complex country, particularly with strategic challenges or over strategic issues, is not a T20 match. It is a 5-day test match. You have to play it session by session. You have to decide what your strategy will be for each session, what your tactics for each bowler or each batsman, and then what end do you want to reach. Sometimes you play to win, sometimes you play for a draw. Obviously, you never play to lose, but that's again, you decide when to take a risk of losing, when it's worth it, when it's not. So, all those things a leader has to weigh. That no leader can do when the leader is responding to public pressure or public opinion at that point. And this has become now a much bigger problem in times of populism, particularly when so many of the countries are being run by these very powerful single-man governments led by alpha male populists, as I keep saying. So for these people then to say that they will not take a decision that their base wants them to take right now to show how powerful and macho they are, that is a challenge. But any leader who makes a decision like that suffers. We have seen Boris Johnson suffered, Donald Trump suffered, Jair Bolsonaro has suffered, all three in the context of coronavirus. Now, Chinese threat on the borders is a different thing. But once again, is it something on which a Prime Minister of India, any Prime Minister of India should respond to the crowd, no matter whether it's a crowd of his admirers or a crowd of his critics? If I take you back to 1962, the big mistake Jawaharlal Nehru made was not in not preparing his army to fight a war with the Chinese. That was a long-term thing. But in ordering his army to go and fight with the Chinese when he knew the army was not ready, he knew the country was not ready, he knew that he had not made preparations, and he knew that that army was going to lose. Maybe he never imagined that the army would lose that badly, or it will be such a one-sided war in that case. He obviously did not imagine that a couple of his generals will prove to be such khota sikkas in the eastern sector, where they were not. For example, in Walong sector in the east or Ladakh, they put up a fight. Nevertheless, he did that out of exasperation because he was so harassed by his critics. And it's not an expression we use those days, but today you would use the expression trolled. So he was so heavily trolled by his critics within his government and in the opposition in parliament that he left himself no choice, and he did not have a thick enough skin. He was thin-skinned, he was very personality driven, and also for somebody who listened so much to his cabinet, he was quite prone, while he was very much a one-man army in many ways, he was also quite prone to what is called as groupthink. And I will now bring you to where that phrase came from and what does it mean. A good leader does not have to decide every time. In fact, who spoke the words, "My decision is no decision"? Famously, it's been attributed to John F. Kennedy. I have not found it documented, but it's just so much a part of the folklore that I think if you search deep enough, you will find it. And this happened in 1962. Remember, in just the week that India-China war started, on 20th October in 1962. On 15th of October in 1962, US intelligence and U-2 aircraft, spy aircraft brought pictures and evidence that Soviet Union was planting nuclear missiles in Cuba. Now this was 800 miles from American coast. Those missiles, given the range of Soviet missiles those days, those missiles would have brought almost every part of the US in their range except maybe the city of Seattle, if at all. So basically, Soviet Union would now have the power to write off all of the US, and the US would not have more than a minute or two of warning because it was only 800 miles away. So there was a sudden alarm, and the armed forces, the chiefs of the defense forces or the military in America wanted immediate massive military strikes over Cuba to take these facilities out, to obliterate this threat from the earth, because they could not afford to have these missiles sitting so close to them. Now this is 1962. So immediate inclination of a leader might have been, yes, be decisive, do it. But in fact, John F. Kennedy, still not a very experienced president, he did not lose his nerve, he did not decide in a hurry. In fact, he got people around him exasperated by not taking a decision. In fact, that is when he's supposed to have said, my decision is no decision. Remember, it's also something that Narasimha Rao once said to Atal Bihari Vajpayee in Parliament. That's a recorded conversation where he said, sometimes कभी कभी कोई निर्णय नहीं लेना भी अच्छा निर्णय होता है. Sometimes not taking a decision is a good decision. What did Nehru do on the other hand? He was so exasperated. He was taking off on a flight, boarding the plane. He said, I have told my army to throw the Chinese out. That was said without conviction, but a shot fired in anger, which had its consequences. So great leaders, great leaderships also figure out a way of getting around this situation, because there is pressure on leaders, particularly very popular leaders, to be seen to be decisive. To be decisive now. Give me a decision. Expert doctor, feel my pulse, tell me what my disease is, give me a diagnosis right now. But Kennedy's experience from that Cuban Missile Crisis, as it's called, tells you that very often it is more prudent for leaders not to decide when under pressure, either of public criticism or public opinion, support, adulation, etc., etc. Now, I will tell you briefly about what happened with Kennedy and how the way he handled that crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis, then became a study in management schools, in universities, in defense forces, in diplomacy, on how to arrive at a sensible decision. So I am taking a lot of the details from an article that I am sharing with you by a University of California, Berkeley professor, Marty Hansen. And this is an article from Harvard Business Review. This is a 2013 article, because as you go back to Cuban Missile Crisis, my decision is no decision, and start searching, in fact, you will find a plethora of literature, projects, teaching handbooks, how to teach students in your class about decision making, and this is probably one of the most important and most prolifically used case studies. So 15th October, this information comes in that U-2 aircraft have picked up evidence that Russians are now completing these missile sites, and very soon these missiles will be kept there. Communication with Russia fails. Khrushchev is not accommodating Kennedy, and Khrushchev had earlier committed to Kennedy that he will not bring, Soviet Union will not bring any missiles in that range of America, but now he had broken that commitment. It's possible, there is a lot of speculation, it's possible that he has done so because before that the Americans had placed their own missiles in Turkey, which, as we know, is very close to the Soviet Union. So whatever the reason, pressure from the armed forces was boom, as it usually is, because armed forces know only one thing, that is to go and fight. And if they have superior power, as they had over Cuba at that point, The inclination was to go and nip this in the bud, but he did not do that. In fact, he decided to let his people debate this. As his people debated this, two ideas came up. One idea was to go and bomb, and the second idea was to announce a naval blockade of Cuba, which will then dissuade the Soviets from coming in, because they would have then known that if they are bringing missiles into Cuba, they will have to fight their way through this American naval blockade. So you created basically one more hedge between a final war which might have led to the destruction of the whole world, or at least of Soviet bloc and America and large parts of NATO, and the first shot being fired. So then that strategy would put the onus on the Soviets now to fire their way through this American blockade. So that was the second prospect that came up. What did Kennedy do then? Read this article and read also, this is a very smart guy, and he's a well-known name in the area of management decision making. He also has a book called Collaboration: How Leaders Avoid the Traps, Build Common Ground and Reap Big Results. Remember, collaboration, how leaders avoid the traps, build common ground and reap big results. So Kennedy called his brother. His brother was Attorney General of America, Robert Kennedy, and he asked him to start taking meetings, debating these issues in the State Department on his own with the key people, where Kennedy would be out. Now, what happened, I will tell you. Also, it's well-known history, but this is how this strategy or this approach to decision making was broken down. So it had 4 steps. First step was, each participant will now become a skeptical generalist. So otherwise the Air Force fellow will say, I can go and bomb all these from the air. The Navy fellow will say, oh, I can go take my submarines and ships and they can bomb the hell out of this place. The Army can say, we'll do it our way. The Marines can say, we will do our way. CIA might say, or intelligence people might say something else. And diplomats might say, oh, I'll go and have, why don't you go and have 2 more vodkas with Khrushchev, or whatever. I'm being facetious. So each one was asked to function as a generalist and give you a larger picture solution. It's like going to a doctor. You go to somebody who is an orthopedician, or who will only figure out what's wrong with your elbow. If your elbow is hurting, if your left elbow is hurting, you go to a cardiologist. He or she will only look at your heart if your left elbow or left arm are hurting, and similarly so on and so forth. In this case, stop being super specialists. Everybody become a general physician. Look at the whole body, which means look at the whole problem. Give me one total solution. So that was the first postulate in that formula. So as Hansen says, Kennedy retooled the decision making process at the top. So number 1, general practitioner versus preferred to super specialists. Everybody be a skeptical general practitioner, generalist, and give me your full solution. Number 2, it's important to stimulate freewheeling debate, and for that settings should be informal for these meetings, because once you call a war room, a situation room setting, then the setting and mood is very formal, and the pressure to take a decision right then is great. So hold meetings in an informal setting. 3, no agenda or no protocol, so that the status of leaders attending that meeting does not matter. So everybody can talk like in a seminar or a discussion. Otherwise what happens is, ideas come from the top and everybody starts looking at it. Set up subgroups. So these subgroups can then debate the alternatives that come up. If the large group comes up with 3 alternatives, for example, you can set up 3 subgroups. Each one can debate and discuss one option and come up with its presentation, and then the group can meet again, and all 3 options or 4 options, or in this case 2 options, can then be debated. And Kennedy also made sure that very often these meetings were held without him. Because what happens when the big boss is around, everybody is looking at the big boss's face. So even if the big boss decides is disciplined not to speak, which is tough, but you can do it, people read the big boss's face, and very few people are such good actors that they will not betray what they think is right and what they think they are liking or not liking. So he also got himself out. So Robert Kennedy, in fact, was holding these meetings and he was organizing these two groups, one large group, then once they broke up into two strategies, one of invasion, second of naval blockade. He would ferry them from State Department to White House to State Department without Kennedy, sometimes 10 of them piling into his car. So in fact, I see a description which talks about in one car, Robert Kennedy at the wheel, Attorney General, President's brother, with CIA Director, Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, and 6 other top functionaries of the US Security and Foreign Policy Department, all packing into one car because they were going and holding their meetings in the State Department without the president, and then coming and giving him the inputs. Finally, when all the inputs came, then Kennedy took a view on it, and obviously he chose then, because heat of the moment had passed, he chose the safer or the more cautious method of a naval blockade. And the rest is history. In the course of time, this resolved itself. Nothing much happened. Now, where did this caution on Kennedy's part come from? That's very important. Because after Kennedy came to power in 1961, early 1961, Kennedy had hardly been a president for a few months yet. He made a big mistake. And what was the mistake? That mistake was called the Bay of Pigs operation. Now, Bay of Pigs operation was, again, there was big irritation in America about Fidel Castro's rise in Cuba. He was a thorn in their side. There was always a concern that he will become, Cuba will be the foothold that the Soviets will use. This was the peak of the Cold War. So the idea was to bring him down. And this was a CIA-led operation, of a covert CIA-led operation using Cuban dissidents, and to land them on the coastline of Cuba through a little inlet on Cuba's southern coast called Bay of Pigs. So Bay of Pigs is not a pejorative description that somebody has thought of because the operation failed so badly. 17th April 1961, this operation started. Within 3 days, it was over because everybody knew that this operation was not going to work. US air support, naval support did not fetch up. So basically, within about 24 hours, America had dumped these people. All of them were defeated by Castro's troops. Castro himself took charge. They were either killed or arrested and sent to jail for a very long time. So this is the famous Bay of Pigs fiasco. Now this is what, remember we told you about that concept called group think, which we said a top leader must avoid, particularly in a crisis situation. So this is a definition that Irving Janis, who was a psychologist at Yale University, he came up with. He said this Bay of Pigs fiasco was a result of groupthink. And what is groupthink? So groupthink, as he defined it, is a psychological drive for consensus at any cost that suppresses dissent and appraisal alternatives, which means one says something, everybody says, हाँ अच्छा idea है, 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 इसको करते हैं. And then whoever dares to say, no, I don't think it's a good idea, is then seen as a bad guy, or seen as a spoiler, or seen as a bad egg, black sheep, whatever. So Arthur Schlesinger, the historian who was there, I'm again quoting from Hansen, Arthur Schlesinger, who was present at these meetings, he said, our meetings were taking place in a curious atmosphere of assumed consensus. No one spoke against it. So that is the enemy of good decision making, when you become part of groupthink. Now, what is groupthink? Groupthink is also what is the other side of one man think. So when one man thinks something and decides, and again there is no openness of debate, discussion, nothing, then again you make these mistakes. So you want to see some recent mistake like that made in India, then I would say demonetization, because it was a decision of the Prime Minister, advised along by a couple of people pop economists, if I may call them, who saw magical results from this. This was not gamed, this was not debated, this was not even groupthink. This was individual think, or maybe groupthink among 3 or 4 or 5 people who all believed strongly in an idea. No idea at a scale like this, or at any scale, should go up for implementation unless it has gone through the usual checks and debates of skepticism, doubts, and also until it games what the other side is going to do. So demonetization, for example, if somebody had said, so what will the Indian citizen who has cash, maybe black money, what will that person do, and what methods will be found to convert this into white, and what will be the arbitrage that builds up? And I'm quite sure there is plenty of institutional memory available in India, because this was not the first demonetization that was carried out. But no such thing was done, once again because of this obsession with shock and awe. And we saw this happen also with the first lockdown, because once again many things were not gamed. For example, what will happen to all the migrant workers who work thousands of kilometers away from their homes into alien cities alien to them. So once again, that was either groupthink or individual groupthink or a tiny groupthink. You can call it coterie, cabal, whatever, but I don't think that is what you have right now in India. You essentially have the boss says something, and everybody then, instead of debating it, then starts to retweet it, because everything is called a masterstroke. So that I am so glad that Narendra Modi now is avoiding that temptation. And I would say his avoiding that temptation, I know what I have said over the past 3 minutes would have upset many of Narendra Modi's followers. But I have to speak the truth. At the same time, what I say now will upset many of his critics, and they might start calling me a chamcha. So just my fate, in the period of 4 minutes, half the people will call me a Modi hater, and the other half will call me a Modi chamcha. But once again, one must speak the truth, and the truth is that he's not responding to this situation under popular pressure or under critics' pressure. Actually is an act of statesmanship, because anybody who fires a shot like that in anger takes completely unnecessary risks. So what happened in the Cuban case? These 2 subgroups that Robert Kennedy put together, first of all, the entire group met, 2 options came in, then they were divided into 2 subgroups, one naval blockade, the other invasion or bombing. They both came up with their reports, and once they had it all ready and they had debated those, and there was nobody particularly wedded to one idea there, and it did not come top down, then Kennedy attended the meeting. So that's the lesson. You want to see examples of how it worked, how it did not work in our history. I told you about Nehru. Nehru responded both to popular opinion and to his critics, more to his critics than popular opinion. People now say, oh, Nehru was fantastic, he held parliament meeting, he shared everything with parliament. But think about it. In 1962, with the Chinese already knocking at your door in a warlike situation, was it prudent for him to place all his correspondence with Zhou Enlai on the floor of the house, knowing that many people will say that, come, let's go to war. Nehru, tum sangharsh karo, hum tumhare saath hain. But what happened? Once he lost the war, everybody dumped him. So the test of a leader is when these pressures come in. And I can give you many examples, but not to waste your time. See Indira Gandhi in 1971, 25th of March 1971, Pakistani army cracked down in East Pakistan. She was under pressure right away. And many people said, this is the opportunity. And there is a lot of folklore that she asked Manik Shah to invade East Pakistan then. And he said something like, no sweetie or no baby, not like this. No such thing happened. No general spoke to Mrs. Gandhi like, no sweetie, no baby. Least of all, General Sam Manik Shah, who was very correct with form. So they talked like grown-up people, and they figured that they needed time to prepare. There was no need to immediately respond to public opinion or to critics or play to any gallery. So Mrs. Gandhi waited 9 full months, almost 9 full months. This was 25th of March. The war started in 3rd of December. And when the war started, it took only 13 days, because by that time, she and Manik Shaw had prepared India militarily. Yes, a lot of new equipment had come in, a lot of other stuff had happened, but also diplomatically and strategically, because in that period, Mrs. Gandhi had gone around the world asking for other countries' intervention to persuade Pakistan to stop its atrocities, etc., etc., etc. She even went to America, had that disastrous meeting with Nixon, the president, but her government also signed that Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation with the Soviet Union, which then was to ensure that during this short war that she fights to win, the Chinese will be off her backs, so she'll be able to move her divisions, mountain divisions facing China into this war, especially the eastern sector, create the right kind of asymmetry and win that war quickly. And once again, how did the war start? In fact, India was carrying out operations for quite some time before the war formally started. In fact, Lieutenant General H.S. Panag, who writes for us, he was a young officer in 6th Regiment, and he first became famous when he rescued some Pakistani pilots who had been shot down by Indian Air Force 10 days before the war actually began in a place called Boira. Now, he saved them. One of them rose to become Chief of Pakistan Air Force, but that was 10 days before. So Mrs. Gandhi was not about to announce a full-scale war. It's only when Yahya Khan got exasperated that once again, while boarding a helicopter or a plane, somebody asked him, so what's going to happen in East Pakistan? Are you going to war with India? And he said, if that woman wants war, I will meet her in the battlefield. So effectively, he is the one who declared war in exasperation, under pressure, and you know what the results were. We can talk about many other things, but let me not go on and on about this. I think the larger point is made that Narendra Modi, I am glad and grateful that he has not gone the way he had gone, being with the obsession of being seen to be decisive as he had, say, with demonetization or with the lockdown without gaming anything. These things are best handled patiently, and once again, if anybody wants to know what difference does patience make, then compare the fiasco at Bay of Pigs, which was groupthink, and then the Cuban Missile Crisis.